We heard Uncle John's Band and Scarlet Begonias with a little bit of Sugar Magnolia worked in between. And we're going to be playing a lot of Grateful Dead music, some of it underground tapes that aren't available on record at all. But the main thing that we're going to do tonight is listen to Jerry Garcia talk about himself and his music. And I did an interview with him about 3 weeks ago, the tape of which I will now play to you all, because it's very informative, and I'm sure you'll dig it. So here's the first part of the interview. And I am honored to be in the presence of my musical guru, Jerry Garcia, and we're taping this interview in a sort of a movie laboratory where they're working on a film. Well, why don't you talk about it for a second, the Dead film.
Well, what would you like to hear about it?
Well, I'd like to know, first of all, when you think it might be done, because there are a lot of people who are interested in seeing it as well as yourself.
Well, we hope to have it done and maybe out by around October, but it could go longer than that. It's comparatively difficult to deal with it. There's a lot of film and you know. And it's just, it's going to take a long time. It's the big thing is it's going to take a long time making it be anything besides a 10-hour movie.
Really?
That's going to be the hard part.
Well, let's see. It consists of 3 consecutive Dead concerts, the last Dead concerts of the current series, right?
Well, actually, what it is that the last gig we played at Winterland, we played for 5 nights.
5 nights.
So it's all 5 nights. And plus documentary stuff all surrounding it and concerned with the setting up of the equipment and all that sort of thing. Oh. The whole thing was covered, really.
So it's not going to be just straight music?
Well, no, it won't, because it'll be it'll have more of include more of the rest of the scene, mostly the people. If you could describe the characters, if the characters in it are basically the audience, the band, and our whole technical staff. That's really who's moving in the movie.
Are you going to try and put the songs together like a typical Dead set?
Well, yeah, it'll be something like that. It can't be a typical Dead set because because the idea of having 4 hours of just concert is going to be hopeless in a movie. Yeah. So we have to make some concessions about that, but we might end up not doing that. It really has a lot to do with what we decide to do in terms of exhibiting it, and the whole. Right now, we're finding out about distribution and all the rest of that kind of stuff, which turns out to be, just like in records, turns out to be the main bummer in film.
Really?
Yeah, distribution, because it represents that large middle structure in everything that goes on in America, which is the middleman, the famous middleman. And the distributors in movies are much more in that position, I think, probably than almost anything else in terms of their piece of whatever, of profit or whatever, however they're structured. And so part of this is to develop a way to distribute it that makes us feel that we haven't been just building another brick in the wall. That's always part of it, but this particularly, since it's a new field really for us to be involved in, and we're into sort of approaching it with whatever purity we can muster it initially, rather than having to do it later like we did with records.
Yeah. Do you think you'd put out a sound track?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably a triple set, something like that.
Well, when you were playing and filming, did you put more juice into this particular 5 days than you did in a normal concert in Nassau Coliseum or something?
Well, I would say it definitely had more juice for a variety of reasons. First of all, because it was our last concert.
Right.
And so emotionally, it had a certain pitch to it, just on the basis of it being the last Dead concert for a while. It had a sort of nostalgia thing to it. But as for the energy, it goes both ways. I mean, some of the nights are the kind of nights that I like, the kind that are sort of effortless and flowing. And some of them are ones with incredible jagged intensity that is like another aspect of what we do. So what we do and the way we do it is pretty much covered, has been covered. So it's mostly a matter of constructing it into something that moves along smoothly and has the same effect as a concert. Hopefully it'll be able to get you off the way a concert does. Part of this, the idea of doing this film in the first place was, and we've been trying to develop alternatives to performing live because of the logistical difficulty and the economical difficulty involved in touring nowadays. The way we do it, is really a trip. And so this represents one possibility, the idea of filming a concert and seeing if really authentically, whether any of the feeling or the good moments or the highness or whatever is able to be translated to this medium. That's really what it has to do with.
It would be a great exploration, and if it's successful, it would be some breakthrough, because like the movie Woodstock and stuff like that kind of just sort of skimmed the surface of what that event was. But going to a Dead concert from the customers, the paying customers' point of view, can be a drag at times, because of the way they tend to push a lot of people into one space, and and they bum you out at the gate because they check you to make sure you don't have any alcohol, and there's kind of like these peripheral problems. But just to sit in a nice theater where it's all controlled, and I mean, you can really get off on it.
Plus, it wouldn't have to be very expensive. It wouldn't be in the range that concert prices are these days, so it wouldn't have that level going for it. And that's part of what we're trying to deal with too, because just where we've been having to play because of audience demand has been these intense control situations, big stadiums and stuff like that, where there's millions of cops and all that. It's the same problem that everybody has to deal with. So this is one of our tries on that level, on the level of idea, and just in terms of something to do, as an artist or whatever. It's, for me, it represents a new level of interest and development that it's getting me off. That's what it's doing, and that's the way I feel about it. I enjoy films. I've been a film buff for a long time and all that. It's neat to be sort of forced into making a movie.
A lot of artists kind of branch out into movie making after exploring other media that just don't quite get to it. It seems like movies kind of sort of have all things going for it in a way.
Yeah, in a way. I mean, in a way, it represents, in terms of the amount of emotional content that you can communicate to an audience, and on that level, it's the ideal situation. People are receptive when they're watching movies, and the movies, I mean, for me, movies have been incredible experiences, good ones, bad ones, moving, emotional ones, all different kinds. Not too often ones that just get you off and make you feel real good. That's like a rare movie.
What movie comes to mind that did that to you? Once?
None. Maybe some Walt Disney movies, that's about as close. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of hard to relate to it quite on that. Well, Children of Paradise is a good movie. It makes you feel good. I've seen, I don't want to go into that.
Yeah, that's a tangent.
Right, for sure.
So the movie is the current project, and you're also doing an album now, another Dead album.
Yeah.
How's that going at this point?
Well, it's going pretty well. I would say that it was the most musically adventurous album we've done in a pretty long time.
In what sense?
Well, it's just that we're doing things that are really unconventional for us. Musically, we're approaching ideas. We're evolving our own development is what we're doing. We're consciously guiding it through a certain stream of possibilities, mostly having to do with new and unusual harmonic relationships that may, I don't know. Quite frankly, it might. Some people might not like what we're doing, but it's another try. It's another thing. In a way, our development has been to synthesize various kinds of forms and like playing jazz, playing country and western rhythm and blues and all that sort of thing, and then forming combinations of all these various genres and styles within what we're doing within our instrumentation. And now we're we're sort of working on creating styles. You know what I mean? Rather than just being eclectic or just synthesizing other styles. So it's a little bit more difficult, and it's also considerably more experimental. I mean, it's really questionable as to whether the things will work, whether they'll be successful musically, but we're sort of into the defining new spaces for ourselves musically to go to.
Are you talking, like, as opposed to the last two albums in the studio, which had been sort of like precise songs? And
yeah.
This is more like the jam trip that you do?
Something like that, and even, and also incorporating songs, but not in song sense, not in that kind of framework. But that's part of what we're trying to adjust, you know, is what are those relationships, what are those definitions, and for us, all those things represent, on some level at least, cliches in our own material, in our own musical habits. You know, there are things that we've done, and we've done them a lot, and we've done them lots of different ways, and so it's, you know, it's a question of sort of restructuring. I mean, suppose none of the forms that we've been playing existed, what would we be playing instead? It's that kind of a question. You know, so it's theoretical, it's experimental. I mean, that's really the right word for what we're doing is experimental.
So do you like have songs written?
No, we're developing those ideas en masse. You know, I'm not, for example, doing like I normally do, which is run off for a week or so, and Hunter and I, you know, knock out 9 or 10 songs a year, you know, and play them, there they are. And those are songs, and we learn them, and the arrangement grows depending on everybody's contribution. We're not doing that. What we're doing instead is just developing ideas, musical ideas, everyone more or less participating, you know, on the actual ideas, you know. No one person is responsible for them.
Is this kind of an outgrowth of the fact that you aren't touring together, therefore you haven't been together in such a long time, so you might as well do something completely different?
Well, we've been together. We haven't been touring, certainly, but we've been, you know, certainly dealing with each other on other levels and doing other things. But yeah, it's also what we hope to be able to accomplish by not performing a lot, which is get away from our habits, get away from our old repertoire, and just, you know, cut ourselves loose from the past, basically, shocking as that might sound, and develop, you know, a new levels to go off of, really, to depart from. And this is the start of that. I could see this kind of developmental thing lasting for a long time, going on for a long time, and we would continue to work on things this way. And it'll be interesting. It's the first time we've ever done things that purely rise from the studio, rather than trying out, rather than learning a tune and then developing a little in a live or an on-stage situation and then recording it. That's normally what we do.
What about the very early albums, like maybe the third album you did or the second that had the long sides with no cuts? Is it anything like that, or?
In a way, I don't think it'll be. I think we have enough knowledge and experience now to pull off some of the things we tried to do on those albums and didn't make. But it won't be. It won't have that. It won't be like that. It'll be different. It'll be something now. You know, something that's happening now rather than what was going on then. It's a little difficult to relate to it because at that time our music was based on certain conceptions in the world and everything else that was going on around us. And our experimental tries at that time were of a certain nature. In other words, they were intended to have a certain effect, say. That was what we were hoping for when we did. Those things turn out to be delusions later because everybody hears what they want to hear, really. And so our purposes in what we're doing are usually only interesting to us, you know, I mean, in terms of how greatly it affects the music and how well you notice, for example, some obscure little idea that we were trying to communicate. You know. In those days, we would spend a lot of time working on an idea that might not even be successful just to try to do it. And we were also learning how to record. So we were we were unconventional just because we were inexperienced in terms of our approach to it. So now we have all this experience, but we're trying to determine unconventionality. You know what I mean? It's a little tricky.
Yeah, it sounds.
It's a little tricky. We've covered a lot of ground, so we've used up a lot of things in terms of freshness.
Right.
You know?
Right. Are you also doing a solo album and doing all? You just amaze me that you have so many projects at once. I mean, I understand you're doing a solo album. You're also touring with Merle Saunders, and how do you channel your energy in such productive ways?
Well, things tend to overlap, generally speaking. Like the way I'm working, I wouldn't be able really to concentrate on sitting in front of a movie editing device I couldn't do that for 8 hours a day. I can do it pretty easily for 6, though. It's pretty interesting for that long, and I feel my attention is on it, and I can do a good job at keeping up with it. Then I would, like to play music. It'd be nice to play music in the studio situation, like when we're recording, is something that also can hold your attention if you're cooking up to 8 hours maybe. But on the average, it's more like 6. If you're being honest, and since we're working in a situation where the pressure isn't on us, particularly to stay there a specific number of hours because we've booked it in advance and so forth and so on. It's more relaxed, so really it's not, it looks like it's more than it really is. And then if I'm on the road, I'm not doing anything during the day, I'm playing evenings. So during the day is a time when it's convenient to compose. You might sit around an hour a day, just play the guitar and practice and maybe learn some things, and maybe some ideas will come out that are like songs, and that represents maybe 2 or 3 hours a day on the road where nothing else is happening but television and a gig that night. Usually a gig will take maybe 4 hours or 5 hours in total time, actually playing maybe only 2 of those or 2.5. Really, it looks like more, It isn't really that much.
But just viewing you from afar, you just seem to be one of the most productive musicians around. I always see.
Just because I'm crazed, I'm obsessed.
People have said that you're a musical junkie.
Yeah, that's as good a description as any. That's a good description.
Okay, we heard Unbroken Chain from the most recent Grateful Dead album called Music from the Mars Hotel, plus the first installment of the Jerry Garcia interview. And we'll come back with more of the interview following this message over radio station WVOI 95.9 FM in Tisbury, Massachusetts. Well, Dead, seems that live Dead was the essence of what you did, and that recorded Dead kind of was a different thing, and most people thought, well, they're so different. How can they be the same group and yet be so different in the studio as live? Do you have any preference to that, whether you dig your music live better than whatever it is?
Well, I prefer playing live to playing in the studio for sure. Just as an experience, it's definitely richer, because it's continuous. I mean, if you play a note and you can see where it goes. You can see what the response is, what the reaction is. There's some, it's reciprocating. In a studio, you can also do that, but you're doing it with the other musicians. And musicians are like, when you have a group of musicians in a studio, it's not unlike having a room full of plumbers, I mean, what we might be interested in as musicians and what we're doing might not relate to anybody else.
Right.
So that's the difference. If there's a real big difference, that's the difference. And also, generally speaking, the studio, in terms of just energy, is a more relaxed, quiet sort of scene. It's not like a concert, and we're not into being artificially energetic. You know, we're not into just getting ourselves excited in the studio and trying to perform live in the studio. Essentially, we have never tried to do that. So it's been appropriate in our case to do a lot of live records, just because that's what we do. Even though the records, I don't believe, are successful. I don't think that records are a successful form to record our live performances, because of the time thing alone. It makes it sort of ridiculous.
You mean the lack of enough time?
Yeah, the fact that a record really can only hold about 28, closer to 23 minutes aside at the outside, and that's not really appropriate. Our records would have to be, I mean, for our records to be reflections of our live thing, they would have to be 4 records, 4 album sets. And that's impractical as can be. So we really are, the definition of what we do is we're a live band for sure. We're not anything but that, and recording has been sort of gratuitous, just because we play music. One of the forms that music can go out in is the record, but it's a distinct form. It's not a reflection of what we do. So we just treat it as though it is what it is. It's as though if you're an artist, you might prefer to work in lithographs, but sometimes you do gouaches, and lithographs might be what get you off the most. But if you have to do a gouache, you do a gouache, or a watercolor, whatever. It's that sort of thing.
So then, what was the reason that you decided not to play live anymore?
Well, there's really a lot of reasons for it. There are kind of 2 levels, or maybe 3 levels of reasons. One of them has to do with just the economics of moving around, the amount of stuff we have. That the amount of money that we would make at the gigs basically wasn't able to pay for moving us around and being able to develop everything, and also to pay everybody. We had a huge organization with a colossal overhead on a weekly basis. And so past a certain point, we were really working to keep the thing going rather than working to improve it or working because it was joyful. And then that brings up the next level, is that we are interested in doing stuff that's joyful or that's fun, But then how do we reconcile that with economic survival? How can we work and have a good time and also pay the bills?
Really?
So we don't have that together. We don't understand how to do that so far. So, and what we were doing was not it. And and also the thing of always playing large, venues, and feeling that remoteness and feeling as though we're creating an unpleasant situation for the audience to come into, which is not what we want to do. And we don't want people to be busted at our concerts. We don't want them to be, uncomfortable or any of those things. And that's been more the standard way they've been. And plus that it's sort of dehumanizing to travel the way you have to travel in a rock and roll band. And that the quality of life on the road and everything is pretty slim. But mostly it has to do with the economics. It also has to do with the thing of we've been doing it for 10 years and we haven't spent any time away from it. That's a long time to do anything without really getting away from it for a while. So we just decided to stop it before it just overwhelmed us.
Really?
Before it got to be really ridiculous, and try to consciously see what the next step is for us. What the thing for us to do is, we don't want to go into the success cul-de-sac. We don't like that place, and we don't want to. And it's not possible for us to really do something that would be totally altruistic, like going and playing free everywhere. If it were possible for us to do that, really we need a subsidy is what we need. The government should subsidize us, and we should be like a national resource.
Better than the Pentagon, I'll say that.
Yeah, right. We could have a lot more fun besides. But those are the kind of things, and then and just the thing of trying to fit in responsible consciousnesses with what's happening in the world, and trying to, and feeling that it's really as much our responsibility as anything to create the right situation for what we're doing to be in, just on any level. That all is what it has to do with.
Was it a hard decision to come to? Like, did you not want to admit it, or was it so painfully obvious that it was like a relief?
Easy, but it wasn't painfully obvious, no, because there was a lot of different factions. There's always factions that want to keep on doing it because, how am I going to make a living, or whatever. There's always different. Everybody has different reasons for wanting to do it or wanting to not do it or whatever. But it was time. That's all. It was just the time to stop.
Right. Well, you reunited recently at the Kezar thing and had a quick flash of sound for about 30 minutes, which was beautiful. Do you see getting back on the stage again eventually, and if so, in a different format?
I can see getting back on the stage eventually. Format is part of what we're trying to determine. And one possible fantasy that we've thought of thinking about ourselves as a more or less permanent musical association is the idea of eventually building a place that would be like a permanent performance place that's designed around us and designed around our specific ideas.
People would have to come to you.
Yeah, right. At least for like maybe 2 months of the year. And then because in terms of our music getting finer and finer, it gets finer and finer if we play in the same room. If we keep playing in the same room, we get really understand it. So the music gets really articulate, which is one of the directions it needs to go in, to be more clearly stated and more greater subtlety and greater nuance, all that. And that has to do with understanding a room really well. And you can do that if you're playing it really often. So that's one possibility. And that would also be a facility for recording and videotaping or filming or whatever in the event that the idea of a canned concert works, if that works. But that would be one possible approach. It would also let us live comparatively normal lives. We wouldn't have to tour. And then if we were going to tour, we could do it, selectively, certain times of the year, whatever. That all has to be defined, but that's one possible fantasy.
Nice idea.
Yeah, it would work. It would be good for the music. That one is one that really would. That's what makes it the most valuable in terms of, it's a good idea because it allows the music to develop.
Next question relates to the vast cult-like following that you've amassed through the years and how you relate to Deadheads. Do you feel like you're responsible to supply them with music, or that their feelings affect you? And the second part of the question is about the incredible underground tape library that is traveling the country.
Right.
Whether you find that you get ripped off, do you feel ripped off by that, or is it groovy?
Not particularly. I don't feel ripped off by it. I think it's okay if people like it. They can certainly keep doing it. I don't have any desire to control people's, what they're doing.
Some artists get freaked that people would bother to tape their concerts, and they actually stop people from doing it all the time.
Yeah, our guys have done that too. Guys have freaked out. Oh, we can't have that going on. But I don't know. It doesn't really matter to me that much, too awfully much. And there's something to be said for being able to record an experience that you liked, or being able to obtain a recording of it. Really, we have all that stuff. Our own collection of tapes of just many performances. I would love to see all that stuff somehow put into a form that we could put it out and have it be real inexpensive so people could get at it if they want it. It's another thing. My responsibility toward the notes is over after I've played them. At that point, I don't care where they go. They've left home.
Well, for one, I have my own collection, which is maybe 50 hours worth of music.
God, amazing.
And I hook up with people in New York and people out here who have tapes, and we share them. And so many people get off on you guys.
Well, that's the thing. If people get off, that's what's good. It doesn't matter what. It doesn't matter whether we make a profit on other people's getting off. That's not why we do it in the first place. Right. That's the way I feel about it, pretty much. But it would be great if there was some way we could work it out, so that we could survive and do what we want to do and not have to, not have to scuffle. Basically, we scuffle. We've been scuffling ever since we started. We get into a larger and larger scale of a scuffle. In terms of now we have this movie thing, record company, and so forth and so on. But they're all just large scuffles, rather than small scuffles.
Do you pattern your music at all according to what you think the audience wants to hear?
No,
not at all.
Never do that. We never do that. More, it has to come from us. It has to be genuine on that level, and that's one of the things that makes it difficult because, like I say, we've really used up a lot of ideas. We've gotten ourselves off on an idea and then murdered it, and then used it until it's gone. It's kind of like that, and in a sense, we've just bankrupted our own material by using it so much. And so the idea is to, create new levels of places to get off. And the audience, I think our audience is more helpful than they're not a hindrance on that level. I think that when we do a show and it's like 40% new material or something, when that rarely happens, which it rarely does, but when it happens, people welcome it. I think they welcome the changes, and I don't feel as though there are certain things I must do for the audience, and
like Dark Star.
Yeah, it's just I think the audience is ready for whatever, rather than going to insist upon hearing Casey Jones or. There's always people that are into that kind of stuff, and that's neat. I'm glad that they are on certain levels. Some levels I'm not. And also, the whole thing is pretty mutable. There are some songs that you can keep doing over and over again, and they still live. They still have something that you can really feel as though the song means something to you. You can do it and feel honest about it. Some material just really lasts that way. Some doesn't. So it's all those things. It's nothing is real solid. But the thing of being able to progress or come up with new ideas, we always have felt free to do that. In fact, compelled.
Well, one way that you do, I think, is the way you plan this. If you plan the sets, that's another question. Or whether just the way one song segs into another. Like, it seems so spur of the moment, is it?
Usually it is. Sometimes somebody will have an idea before we, like during the break, and have an idea for a possible sequence of things that can relate, and we might talk it over real fast. Or sometimes those little huddles on stage.
Yeah. Right.
So we say, hey, I got a great idea. Why don't we blah, 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 take this and go from that to that, and unfold this and that. And then sometimes we'll do it. Sometimes we'll go along with the program, and sometimes we'll depart from it entirely. Sometimes we won't have any program at all, and it'll just be spur of the moment. It works every different way.
It does.
God, we've been doing it so long that, every conceivable possible permutation, it's been...
Do you have, signals so that people know, well, let's stop this and go into that now?
No, but we all are so well acquainted with each other's playing, and also with the ideas contained in the tunes that I can play the barest minimum of an idea from another tune that we do, and the band will understand
Pick
immediately.
It up. Yeah.
Unified unintended. Minimum of an idea from another tune that we do, and the band will understand immediately. Unified unintended. If it was just accidental, that kind of thing happens a lot, and then a lot of it is miracles. And that's part of what of creating new forms has to do with. It has to do with creating a situation in which miracles can happen, in which amazing coincidences can happen, that all of a sudden you're in a new musical space. And that's the challenging part about coming up with structures that are loose tight. They have an element of looseness to them, which means they can expand in any direction or go anywhere, from anywhere, or come from anywhere. But they also have enough form so that we can lock into something.
Right.
So it really has to do with the element of what's knowable and known, and what isn't known and what isn't knowable, and what can be invented on the spot. And there's a delicate balance in there. And since we're dealing with several consciousnesses at the same time, everybody going through their individual changes, that those times when everybody is up for it and everybody feels right about it and the form provides openings, then miracles can happen, amazing miracles. And that's what we're in it for. That's one of the reasons we do it, is for those moments of unexpected joy.
I know.
Just amazing stuff. And that's that's something that you have to, you definitely have to think about how it works mechanically. Just how does it work? You have to sort of explore that thing, And we've been exploring it for a long time. We don't really know anything about it.
Simple twist of fate.
Yeah, right. That's what we're doing here. Right. Orchestrated twists of fate.
Where the sun don't ever shine.
I've noticed through the years your music changing a lot. It started off the San Francisco psychedelic sound, and Pigpen was a big part of it. And then after he kind of left his body, it sort of went into an acoustical phase, like with American Beauty. Well, he was around for that, but you were obviously changing. And the last couple albums have been sort of a slicker studio sound, which I've enjoyed, but other people have kind of, like, some people are edgy about it. When Pigpen departed, was that a big break in your sort of history as a group?
Well, yeah, sure. It's like, all of a sudden it's not the same group.
Right.
It's a different group. And Pigpen had influenced a lot of what we were doing just because of who he was, and that the music had to be able to include him. In a way, Pigpen, technically at any rate, Pigpen represented sort of like the low water mark. You know what I mean? And we couldn't go past that, because if we came up with anything that was too complicated for him, he couldn't play it.
Really?
And so everything was structured to be able, at least includable in Pigpen's orbit, or else he wouldn't play. He'd lay out or stuff. And then there were the tunes that he sang, and the rest of us got to just goof around,
Right.
And he had that thing of being able to really carry an audience too. He was like really more of a showman and more out there than the rest of us.
Yeah.
And so that element, we don't have that anymore. What we have is a more group-like identity, probably. And it's definitely different. It's hard to say. It's not a question of better or worse. It's just different.
Were you aware that he was like on the way out?
Oh yeah. Well, see, we were all prepared. We were prepared emotionally for it a full year and a half before, because that was when he first went into serious illness. And there was a week or so where everybody gave blood for him and everything like that, and he was in real bad shape, and that was when it looked like he was going to die.
Right.
So we were all emotionally prepared for it during a 2 or 3 week total emergency bummer, and then he recovered and slowly got himself back together and was back in the band, and we were working and everything, and then he just snuck away, which is really sort of, it was typical of him. It was typical of the kind of person he was.
Did you try and influence him to a more like healthy existence?
Oh, sure, but we failed.
Yeah.
We failed just because he was an incompleted person in a way, and we all knew it, and he knew it, and that was just the way it was. It wasn't the kind of thing where, you can only do that so long and so hard and have effect. Actually, the thing of him getting that ill straightened him out way more than any talk from us. And he was, in fact, really working at getting himself together. He hadn't been drinking for a year and a half at all, zero. And but his body was just gone. It was just shot. It was beyond the point where it can repair itself, and that was the thing. Finally, that did it. It wasn't as though he was on some kind of final bender and then killed himself. He was actually on the road to, a new persona, a new self,
a new incarnation.
Yeah, as it turned out, yes.
Right.
I've been balling a shiny black steel jackhammer, been chipping up rocks for the great highway.
That, of course, is a song called Easy Wind off the Working Man's Dead record, which is probably the most popular Grateful Dead record. But tell me, Jerry, I'd like to know what particular album that you've done, seems the most satisfying work or song. Anything that comes to mind?
Well, it's kind of hard to say, They usually aren't like that. And most of the time when we're working on an album, there's stuff going on in life,
right,
that has your attention than working on the album. And working on the album is just like going to work. It's like having your job, and you go in and you work on it, and you don't really know what's on it until much later. And sometimes you never know. Sometimes you don't know until somebody says to you one day, that album, says this and that and whatever, Sometimes you just don't know. So, for example, Working Man's Dead, which has turned out to be our most significant album on that level, on a certain level, was the album that we worked the least on. We spent, I think we spent 19 or 20 days or something like that and finished the whole album. And while that was going on, that whole being busted in New Orleans was hanging over our heads. We were in the middle of this Lenny Hart weird hassle going on internally, and all this other stuff was going on, and it was like the record was like an afterthought. I mean, it was really beside the point compared to what we were going through at the time. And with American Beauty, there was this rash of parent deaths where everybody's parents cacked in the space of about 3 or 4 weeks, or maybe 2 or 3 months. We were working on that record. It was really incredible. It was just like tragedy city. Everybody was it was bad news every day. Really, it was incredible. And we were working on this record, but the work gets to be, you're so distracted by what's going on in life that the work gets to be something. It has a mysterious life of its own that you don't even notice until way later.
I had no idea.
Yeah, it's odd. It seems like it's always something like that. Something like that is happening in the middle of it.
How do you feel about the last 2 records?
They were near misses. The first one we were extremely rushed to pull it in under the wire because of our whole deadline set up and the pressure of putting on our first record on our own label. We were rushed. We didn't really get to do the job on it at one. Plus, we were in a studio that was not really. It didn't really make it as a studio. And then that's also true of the second one, of the Mars Hotel, because there we were working at Columbia, which is so straight, it might as well be the General Hospital. It really is straight. And the vibes there were abominable. They were appalling. We were working with a real straight engineer, and he was, it was wrong for us, really. We had some good ideas and some nice music and stuff like that, but I think the execution and the spirit suffered because of the place we had to work.
You couldn't have changed that in midstream?
We could have, but we're not really that bright, you know. And besides, financially, the way those things are structured, when you make a deal for the studio time, we don't have that kind of power, you know, to snap decisions. Because, like, if we're getting a cut rate, it's because we bought a month's worth of time, you know what I mean? Yeah. That kind of stuff. It's all part of the scuffle.
Money.
Yeah. Right, and it's amazing how much it's limited what we do and how we do it, and still does. It represents, in the real world, it's the main limit. And you know, sometimes we have it together to work around it or something. So sometimes, most of the time, we don't, and we don't want to work with a big record company the kind of people who have that kind of power, because we don't like those people. You know.
I notice on your albums that any song that comes from you is also associated with Robert Hunter. Have you ever, how does that work, and have you ever tried to actually write words yourself?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've tried.
Nothing that you would say would stand the test of time?
No, I don't. I have never developed the necessary discipline to really write gracefully. I'm a better editor than I am a writer, for sure. Mm-hmm. I do some writing, but I'm not at all serious about it. And I usually find that if I have an idea that wants to be expressed in words, that Hunter can express it better than I can. And also he and I have such a good working relationship that if I have a suggestion of any sort, you know, it works just very smoothly. You know, we don't clash. Mm-hmm. In terms of our egos, and we both tend to focus on the work, and neither of us focuses on ourselves. So it works out to be very comfortable. And you know, I mean, my capacity as a person who chooses a lyric to sing is really about as much as I would want to have toward the responsibility of the content. You know. Mm-hmm. I mean, the fact that those are the things of Hunter's output, which is really pretty enormous. Only a small part of it ever gets to be he and I songs, and those are usually edited quite a lot from what they originally were, and we work together to make it, to form something that's satisfying to both of us and that works out right. But you know, we overlap. It's like the tip of the iceberg kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Do you usually think of the melody and he adapts the lyrics, or
it works both ways? Sometimes I think of the changes, the melody, the phrasing, you know, where there should be vowels, where there should be consonants, you know. Oh, yeah. I can get down to as much musical detail without actually having words. And then he can, you know, he has enough technique to be able to actually fill out those requirements. And sometimes he has a lyric, and I'll read it, and it'll just knock me out. I'll say, this is amazing, I want to set it, and I'll take it and work on it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we'll take bits and pieces of things, you know, different ideas, stick them together, polish them. I mean, we work every different way. Also, you know, that also is not limited by some particular stylistic approach. It's whatever works.
His lyrics do have a certain feel to them that are very unusual. They're kind of very surreal, and he can't always, like, grab them and say, oh, yeah, I understand this song. It's, like, very amorphous in a way.
Well, that's part of my editorial finger in there. Yeah. That's the editorial hand of Garcia in there. And my feelings about it are that, well, personally, I have this hang-up about songs. I'm fascinated by fragments. Uh-huh. I'm fascinated by fragments because of my involvement in traditional music. There's a lot of things around that are fragments of songs, old traditional songs, and they'll be like this tantalizing glimpse of 2 or 3 verses of what was originally a 30-verse extravaganza, you know. Mm-hmm. And there's be like 2 or 3 remaining stanzas left in the tradition, and that you read them or hear them, and they're just utterly mysterious and evocative for odd reasons, different times. So I have a tendency to want to not have a song be topical in the sense of an idea surrounding an idea. I like for a song to be speaking to the mysterious, you know. Mm-hmm. Just because that tends to make it so that you can create your own images can happen. Mm-hmm. Your own images. It's a little like radio plays. Your own images. You fill in what you want, you know, on the basis of what you hear. And I like songs that are more evocative than, say, thought-provoking or obvious.
protest songs.
Right, topical songs. We've written a few topical songs, but they're just that. That's the way they work out, is they end up being real topical because they're frozen to a certain time.
Like which one?
Well, like Speedway Boogie, for example. I think that's probably the most topical song we've ever written. It's really specific.
This darkness got me.
New Highway Speed Bee Boogie, or something to that effect, by the Grateful Dead off Working Man's Dead, a topical song, according to Jerry Garcia. And we'll be back with more of Jerry Garcia and the Grateful Dead. Hope I don't repeat myself too much tonight. You're hearing the show over at radio station WVOI 95.9 FM on your radio dial. And I'm Peter Simon, and this is Good Vibrations, and we'll be right back. What musicians have stood out in your mind as ones who definitely influenced you or that you look up to and think you have stuff to learn from them?
Oh, everyone, everything, all music. You know, I'm not, particularly attached to any one idea or format or anything. I just appreciate whatever's good, and it's just whatever I hear. It's like endless numbers of anonymous musicians who I don't know on the radio and stuff like that have influenced me. You know, not to mention all the people that are well known or whose names I do know. They've influenced me too. Millions of them. I listen to everything.
Well, your guitar playing is kind of unto its own, you know. There's nobody that I can think of who plays like you, but how did you learn that kind of, whatever it is?
I can't really say. It hasn't been the product of, I don't know. The only thing I can relate to, really relate it to in terms of the roots of my own playing, has to do with a sound that I would wish I would hear. You know. Something that I wanted to hear, or maybe a little snatch, a moment of a guitar player, you know, on some record, or just a moment, and there's something about it that says that is a door to something. I can't really explain it. It's emotional, and it goes back to my earliest years.
Really?
You know, it really is. It's that deep, and it just is me really selecting out of the universe stuff that's part of that sound. It's a thing which sometimes I hear it very clearly, sometimes I don't hear it at all. But it's produced my whole development.
Did you pick up a guitar at an early age and start learning basic chords?
No, I didn't, unfortunately. I wish I had. I got my first guitar when I was 15, and it was an electric guitar. And I played it for 6 months, almost a year, without knowing how to tune it at all. I had it in some silly open tuning, something that sounded good to my ear, and I figured out all kinds of chords and things in it. I didn't know anybody that played guitar, and I was too arrogant to take lessons. And finally somebody showed me the right way to tune it, but I blundered all along. You know, I didn't really start playing or start working at the guitar until I was about 23.
Oh, wow.
You know, all the rest of the time I just screwed around. And I worked on the banjo for a while. That's the thing that taught me about working or about learning. I got serious about the banjo. And then after that, getting serious about the guitar, I'd already been through the step of getting serious. You know, so that means that I knew how to learn, so I started learning how to play the guitar and working at it. But I'm still working at it. I'm still learning. It's not a process that just finally you're through learning and you know how to play. You know, it's never that way. And I feel that I'm a person that doesn't have a great amount of talent. You know, in the sense, I don't feel like I'm a gifted musician. I feel like what I've learned, I've had to really work at learning. It's been a hassle. You know, basically, that's what